Birmingham. We now go to question time. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Australians needed a budget that addressed the causes and not the symptoms of Labor's homegrown inflation by increasing the supply of energy and housing. Instead, Australians got a budget that, in the words of independent economists, was extremely expansionary, smoke and mirrors, and a political trick. Minister, isn't your budget simply a political sugar hit rather than addressing inflation at the source, a band-aid on a bullet wound?
Order. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And yesterday, thank you, President. I thank Senator Hume for the question. I think yesterday I used the word audacious for one of the questions I got asked by the opposition. But really, honestly, to come in here and ask this government in 2 years has done on stabilising the energy system in this country, driving renewable energies after a decade, and how many policies was it? 22. 22 policies, and not one of them landed. Not one of them landed. A decade, a wasted decade of fighting in amongst yourselves rather than putting the nation's interests at heart and front of mind. That is what we have done. The moment we came to government, and if there's two stark areas of where we have been the opposite of how you behaved in government, wasting a decade, in 2 years, what we have done in terms of energy policy, in terms of putting downward, in terms of energy bill relief, in terms of the caps, all of that you voted against. On the Housing Australia Future Fund, how did you vote on that? Opposed it. Everything we have done to increase housing supply, in this country after a decade of no interest from the Commonwealth other than a suggestion, which we might see again tonight, to ransack your super so that young people don't leave with any retirement savings, and you inflate the housing prices across Australia. Well, we'll see that rejigged tonight, no doubt. This budget put the Australian people and the national interest right at the centre of our decision-making, whether it be cost of living relief without adding to inflation or dealing with the many challenges that we inherited, including in energy policy and housing policy that had been abandoned by you when you were in government.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. Paul Bloxham, the chief economist at HSBC, said of this government's budget, "We expect some of this additional income will be spent supporting consumer demand and adding to inflation." Stephen Halmerick of CBA said the risk is now more real than the first interest rate cut could be delayed. Do you disagree, Minister, with independent economists of every stripe that have said that your budget is simply going to mean that interest rates stay higher for longer?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
We stand by the inflation forecasts that are outlined in our budget. That incorporates the decisions that we have taken in this budget, decisions which, again, we'll hear from the Leader of the Opposition tonight, whether there are any decisions that he supports or whether he's going to continue with his negativity and no plan for the country by voting no to everything, including the $300 energy bill relief, which will put downward pressure on inflation, as will the assistance we're providing through Commonwealth rent assistance, again overlooked by those opposite, because you didn't really care about the people who relied on Commonwealth rent assistance when you were in government. We have increased it twice in 2 years, the first time that that's been done in 30 years, again providing much-needed assistance to those households and putting downward pressure on inflation. We've also capping the price of medicines, so those that rely on medicines won't have any increased costs there. So focused on the people, focused on the economic challenges that we face, and focused on the future.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. This government has had 3 budgets now to address the causes, not the symptoms, of inflation. Getting energy prices down by injecting more supply, streamlining approvals to deliver more houses, and lowering aggregate spending to put real downward pressure on inflation. This budget is propped up by the hard decisions of Australian families who are paying more for everything. Minister, when will you make the hard decisions so that Australian families don't have to?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. I would like to thank you, and I'll take the question. I would like to remind those opposite that inflation was at over 6% when we came to government. Interest rates had begun increasing, and inflation is now got a 3 in front of it and projected to have a 2 in front of it. So all this rubbish that they go over with about how this, how we're exacerbating inflation, we have halved it. The highest quarter in terms of inflation was under your government. We have been dealing with this every single day since we came to government. We have found savings in the budget. We have delivered 2 surpluses, or 1, and we've got another one in sight. The first government to do that, if it was so easy, why didn't you do it?
Order.
If it was so easy, why did it elude you? Oh, a decade, no surpluses, savings, lower debt, lower interest on that debt, surpluses and inflation
Order.
half of what it was when we came to government.
Minister. Senator Ciccone.
Thanks a lot, President. President, my question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. I note the Treasurer's comments on Tuesday night that one of the most important things about Australia is the way that we look after each other. Could the Minister please inform the Senate how the Albanese Labor government's budget will ease cost of living pressures for millions of Australians, and in particular what the government is doing to build on its impressive record of supporting these Australians by strengthening Medicare?
Senator Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Ciccone for his question. And like every senator on our side, understands the importance of Medicare, because we are the party of Medicare and Labor is the party of stronger Medicare. That is who we are. And Tuesday's budget only reinforces that fact, because we on this side understand that Medicare goes to the heart of who we are as Australians. We understand that everyone deserves access to affordable health care, to accessible health care, to quality health care. And this is why we have announced that we will be funding 29 more Medicare urgent care clinics across the country. Now, early this year in South Australia, I visited the Marion Urgent Care Clinic with a fantastic member for Boothby from the other place. And I saw firsthand the role of these clinics in taking pressure off our emergency departments and in making care more affordable and more accessible to more Australians. Now, this is a good thing. This is another good policy that those opposite don't support. Now, not only have we established more than 50 of these clinics, there are more on the way. And in this budget and in previous budgets, you've seen Labor's commitment to stronger Medicare, tripling the bulk billing incentive. We've made medicines cheaper, also opposed by those opposite, and we are freezing the cost of PBS medicines. And of course, those opposite might remember that this Tuesday's budget is 10 years on from the infamous 2014 budget. 10 years on from what might have been Mr Dutton's only real idea when it comes to health care. His one idea as health minister: make Australians pay more. Make Australians pay more. Tax medicines, tax patients going to hospitals, and impose a GP tax. That's what Mr Dutton really thinks about Medicare. No surprises that this bloke was voted by Australia's doctors as the worst health minister in a decade.
Has expired. Senator Ciccone, first supplementary.
Thank you very much, President, and thank you, Minister. Along with health costs, people in my home state of Victoria tell me that energy prices are a major driver of the cost of living pressures that they are currently facing. Can the Minister please update the Senate on the effect of the government's energy price relief that has had on inflation, how the 2024-25 budget adds to this relief?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, from the 1st of July this year, everyone who has an electricity bill will receive an energy bill rebate under the Albanese Labor government. We're building on our 2022 energy bill relief by delivering all households a $300 credit to be automatically applied to their electricity bills. Over 10 million Australian households will benefit. I hear the complaint from those opposites. I hear them yet again not wanting to support cost of living relief for Australians. Again, not wanting to support cost of living relief for Australians. Well, they are true to form. They keep opposing it, just as they have always opposed higher wages for working people. You always make people want to make people work longer for less. Well, we actually want people to have good wages, and we also want to help people with cost of living relief, something those opposite have never been prepared to support in this place. Well, tonight we will see what they're really about.
Senator Ciccone, second supplementary.
Thank you again, Minister, and thank you, President. Noting the Albanese government's #1 priority is taking pressure off Australians, can the minister please explain how the government's responsible economic management is helping to do just that, while at the same time building a much more secure future for all Australians?
Order. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Well, the budget the Treasurer handed down on Tuesday night is a responsible budget. It's a budget that helps Australians under pressure today and invests in our future. We are projected to produce another surplus. We are continuing to fight inflation. We are continuing to help Australians with the cost of living, and we are investing in a future made in Australia to grasp the opportunities of the future. We will build more homes, and we will continue to support Medicare. What do we hear from those opposite? Well, they seem to think that no is a plan. No is not a plan. I hate to break it to you.
Senator Cash.
We've already heard them, including today, saying there's too much spending. Well, you know what? It's time to front up and to fess up. It's time to front up and to fess up. It's time for you to tell Australians what you're going to cut. What are you going to cut? What are you going to oppose? It's time for you to be upfront with Australians. Are you going to
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Bragg.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Aspiring homeowners were the biggest losers in Tuesday night's budget. There is no support for first home buyers or any initiatives to address the drain on supply. Labor remains blind, to the impact of record levels of migration and booming construction costs, which are locking Australians out of the housing market. IFM Investors Chief Economist Alex Joyner says that, quote unquote, the overwhelming consensus of economists is that the budget drives inflation, which will hurt aspiring and current home buyers by keeping interest rates higher for longer. Minister, why did Labor have no policies at all that support home ownership in this budget?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Gallagher.
Oh my goodness.
Order. Order on my right. Order on my right. Minister.
Thank you, President. I welcome the question. I thank Senator Bragg for giving me the opportunity to talk about Homes for Australia plan. It may have passed him by as he develops hand-in-hand with the Leader of the Opposition or a rehash of the super raid that he'd like to see young people forced to do to get into home ownership, which we expect that we will see tonight, a rehash of an old idea that will do nothing to enable younger Australians to get into home ownership. Because I can talk to you about all of the initiatives. Over the next 6 years, we will be investing in the order of around $32 billion in a range of programs, including programs that support people into home ownership, like the Help to Buy shared equity scheme, like the Regional Home Ownership Scheme, which I think has been so successful. But in addition to that, driving supply of new housing across the country, working with states and territories. So maybe Senator Bragg didn't see that we put more money in to get more homes built sooner, working with states and territories. I know it's something that those opposite never did in government. They always like to divide and have fights with the states and territories, but we find that it's much more productive for the Australian people if we are able to work with those that make decisions about planning to build more houses. There is no government in the history of the Federation that has done more and is doing more to drive housing supply in this country. We have our eye on this. This is a major challenge, one that we inherited after a decade of absolutely no action from those opposite, whether it be in supportive accommodation, whether it be accommodation for women, whether it be looking at ways to support the provision of rental accommodation, assistance through the Commonwealth Rent Assistance and more.
The time for answering has expired. Order on my left. Senator Bragg.
Minister, while ever more Australians sleep in tents and cars, the Labor government has continued the big lie that it will achieve its 1.2
Senator Bragg,
million.
you need to withdraw that.
Okay, well, it will continue to. I'll withdraw. Continue the mistruth that it will achieve the 1.2 million home target by mid-2029. Why is the government ignoring its own Labor premiers, such as New South Wales Premier Minns, who have told them repeatedly that this target is totally unachievable under Labor's current policies?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I will essentially start where I finished, around working with states and territories. We remain committed to our target for 1.2 million homes. We have the Housing Australia Future Fund, which is going to build 30,000 homes. Where the states and territories raise issues with us, we respond, and you've seen it in this budget. We've put more money in to get more homes built sooner. We've finalised the National Agreement on Social Housing and Homelessness. We're directing more money towards crisis and transitional accommodation, all issues that have been raised by the states and territories and dealt with in this budget. We are also dealing with the skills development to make sure that we are getting the workers into the jobs that we need in the construction workforce, including 20,000 new fee-free TAFE places. And so tonight, when the Leader of the Opposition stands up, he should outline his plan, and it should go beyond your rating, your superannuation. What are you going to do about jobs? How are you going to find the skills? And how are you going to deal with the challenges in the housing market?
Senator Bragg, second supplementary.
President, it's not only the Labor state premiers who agree that Labor's housing policy is a shambles. In fact, the National Housing Supply and Affordability Council, your own committee, recently reported that Labor's target will, to quote, not be achieved, end quote. Minister, when will the Labor government be honest about the housing crisis and the failure of your own policies?
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Minister Gallagher.
We are certainly very honest about the challenges in the housing market. I don't think anyone pretends there aren't. And we will also be honest about what we inherited when we came to government, which is absolutely zero attention to this for a long period of time, and states and territory leaders have told us that. They told us that the Commonwealth under your government did nothing, wasn't interested, didn't deal with them, didn't provide them any support in order to deal with this. We have more programs. We remain committed to that target. It is a challenge, but it's a challenge that we are going to have to meet, and we will work with the states and territories to meet it. Our programs that are rolling out now, the Minister for Housing is doing an incredible job. There are housing being opened almost every week across this country, thanks to some of the programs that the Commonwealth has supported, including we're helping more than 110,000 people into their own homes through the expanded Home Guarantee Scheme.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McKim.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Minister, Labor's budget entrenches economic inequality and exacerbates the climate crisis. It does little to help people getting smashed by cost of living pressures, but lines the pockets of Labor's corporate donors, the property developers, banks, coal and gas corporations and the supermarket giants. Why have you locked in obscene levels of expenditure on things like AUKUS, tax cuts for the rich and subsidies for burning fossil fuels, rather than raising the rate of job seeker and youth allowance, capping rents, wiping student debt or putting dental and mental health into Medicare? How can you justify a budget that so clearly prioritises corporate greed over people doing it tough and the health of our planet's climate and ecosystems?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. And I completely disagree with the question that Senator McKim asked. I think it's not an unexpected question from the Greens political party that see things in such black and white ways. We have, in this budget, focused our priority on cost of living relief. We have done over 3 budgets, more than I think any government, certainly in my recent times, around improving payments, responding on rent assistance, making childcare cheaper, expanding Medicare so that more people can see a doctor without paying. Our urgent care clinics have been used around 400,000 presentations to those clinics where people don't have to pay. The work we've done in medicines to keep medicines low. The work we're doing in housing to generate crisis, affordable and social housing is all aimed at people who are doing it tough. Where, in terms of the shift to renewable energy, I would have thought that there were things in this budget that would have got a bit of an applause from the Greens political party, in terms of the shifting the focus in the future made in Australia under the renewable energy superpower to try and promote new industries and new jobs and new opportunities in clean energy with hydrogen and critical minerals. This is the first budget that puts a serious investment in those new energy sources, and we have not changed any arrangements. Listening to your question, it's like we've found new money to put into older industries or new areas. That's not true. There are areas under the tax system which remain in place, but at the same time we are trying to incentivise new jobs and new opportunities and seize the opportunities that come with the shift to a net zero economy. I would have thought that even if you named all the other areas, that there was at least that area that you would support in this budget.
Has expired. Senator McKim, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, in the face of dire warnings about the health of our planet's climate and the need to move rapidly away from fossil fuels, how can you defend the budget's decision to increase gas production, which underpins so much of the budget? How can you continue to justify approving new coal and gas mines, destroying native forests? How can you look Australians in the eye and tell them that you are caring for their future?
Thank you, Senator McKim. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President, because I think any reasonable person who would look at this budget would see exactly what the government is trying to do: show leadership and incentivise and support communities on the shift to net zero, whether it's the planning that the Net Zero Authority is going to do in areas of this country where workers and communities will be affected to support them through the transition, or whether it's in promoting new opportunities for industry and business to get involved. I'm sure that those here would have to recognise that in the 2 years that we have been here, we have done more to support not only the transition to net zero, but to address climate change and to deal with some of the challenges that we've inherited in the Environment Department and environment policy space that had, again, been left unattended after a decade of wasted time and not addressing the issues that the Australian people face. So we are doing this. Every single budget we try to shift the dial.
Senator McKim, second supplementary.
Well, thanks, President. Saying you're doing better than the previous government is clearing an extremely low bar. Minister, in the face of a cost of living crisis pushing Australians to the brink, why are you failing to tackle rampant profiteering and price gouging by corporations? Will you work with the Greens to make price gouging illegal, or introduce a corporate super profits tax to rein in profiteering and put downwards pressure on inflation? If not, why not?
Order. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you very much. Again, this is a question I think Senator McKim has asked me in various ways over the last 2 years, and my answer remains the same. We have outlined our plans in relation to tax reform. There's a number of those bills that currently sit before the Senate. That is our focus. Of course, the main priority was to get the tax cut legislation, so every Australian getting a tax cut on July the 1st this year. That has been our focus. It remains our focus with the bills that are before the parliament. In relation to some of the work that's been happening on the supermarket front, which I think is the other part of Senator McKim's question, there is a number of pieces of work underway, including the work that the Consumer Group Choice is doing around providing transparency and comparison reports on a quarterly basis for the next 3 years. There's the work that Dr Craig Emerson has done. There's the work that the ACCC is doing, and the Senate is doing as well.
Time for answering has expired. Senator Sterle.
Katie Gumpy. Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The Treasurer has said that this is a budget designed to help people while also setting Australians up for the future. We've just heard from Minister Wong earlier about the important cost of living measures contained in the budget. Can you update the Senate on how the Albanese Labor government is setting Australians up for the future? And Minister, how will the government's Future Made in Australia policy gear up the Australian economy to grow into the future?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Sterle for the question and acknowledge that WA has some real opportunities under the Future Made in Australia policy, and I know that people in Western Australia will be looking closely at the plans that the government has outlined in the budget. The Albanese government believes in planning for the future and creating opportunities for all Australians to benefit from the huge economic and energy transformation that the world is currently undertaking. The government's Future Made in Australia package is all about encouraging and facilitating private sector investment required for Australia to succeed and become an indispensable part of that future global economy. A Future Made in Australia, as the Treasurer said yesterday, will maximise our geological, meteorological, geographical and geopolitical advantages, making more things here, creating secure, well-paid jobs and responding to the net zero transition that offers so many opportunities for all Australians. A Future Made in Australia will attract investment in renewable hydrogen, green metals, critical minerals, solar and batteries. It will make Australia a renewable energy superpower. It will strengthen economic resilience and security. It will back Australian innovation and science, and it will invest in people and places where this transition will take place. Our policy includes production tax credits for renewable hydrogen and processed critical minerals. It involves investment in Australia's renewable energy agency that's been so successful, despite those attempts to shut it down from those opposite. The Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund, the $1 billion Solar Sunshot and $500 million Battery Breakthrough Initiative, the quantum computing investment and a range of other reforms that will accelerate approvals. We know that this country can be a renewable energy superpower. Solar, wind, green hydrogen and harnessing the cleaner and cheaper energy that can come from a power of new generation of manufacturing.
Senator Sterle, first supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister. Finally, Australia has a government thinking about the future. I am so rapt. As you've outlined, Future Made in Australia is a significant policy that responds to the great opportunities the energy transition presents. Can you please outline some of the ways Australians will benefit from a future made in Australia? Listen up.
Oh, thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Gallagher.
President. Thanks, Senator Sterle, for the supplementary. Making more things here in Australia, which will mean creating more secure, well-paid jobs in our suburbs and regions, something that you've spent your working life on, Senator Sterle. We've committed investments over 5 years to support world-class skills, training and tertiary education, including financial support for apprentices, including accelerating the development of the clean energy workforce and making sure that women get an opportunity in that, including supporting the growth of the construction workforce. Our payments for the practical time that nurses, teachers and midwives and social work students spend doing prac placements. These are all about investments in the workforce of the future that underpin and form part of the Future Made in Australia. Through that plan, the Albanese government is investing a further $1.3 billion in our people and the places at the centre of this economic transformation. We want to support the transition of workers whose skills that we will need in the new industries.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Sterle, second supplementary.
Oh, yes. Thank you, President. I'm absolutely rapt. Thank you, Minister, and congratulations to yourself and the Treasurer for producing this important budget for all Australians. Can you please, Minister, outline the approach you took in putting this budget together, and why is it important that political leaders are upfront about their policies?
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator Sterle. Thank you, President. Well, we knew and know that Australians are doing it tough, so that's why we had a cost of living focus in this budget. And we know also that the country faces the biggest economic transition in history, so we have to plan for that future. But what do we hear from those opposite? We hear them deriding the cost of living support. We hear them laughing at the Future Made in Australia. They're not coming up with plans about how to support workers or communities unless it's about where to place a nuclear reactor, of course, which we look forward to hearing from tonight. Where are all those nuclear reactors going to go? Whose electorate are those nuclear reactors going to go in? Well, the pressure is on. While we're planning for a future as part of the global transition to net zero, we've got the opposition, I think, working on their 23rd or 24th energy policy, and they still haven't even been able to land that. They can't land it in opposition. You can't trust them with their plans on nuclear energy.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Education, Senator Watt. This week's budget announced payments for students doing mandatory practical placements in teaching, nursing, midwifery and social work courses. Students have told me how hard it is for them to take on these mandatory placements, which can see them do months of work for no money. They're forced to choose between finishing their degree or paying their rent. But this policy doesn't do anything to trim the amount of government money going to universities for placement units. Minister, why does your paid placement policy ask taxpayers to pay for student training? It doesn't put any of the responsibility on universities.
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Tyrrell. I'm glad you've asked this because this is an issue that so many younger Australians are facing undertaking their university studies, because we know that many university courses do require students to undertake a placement as part of their degree. And the types of courses I'm thinking about particularly are nursing, teaching, social work and other like courses. The Universities Accord review that the government commissioned and Minister Clare commissioned did make recommendations that we fund students to undertake those practice placements, and that's exactly the recommendation we followed. I'm not aware of the Accord review having recommended that payments be made or that the responsibility be put on universities in the way that you're suggesting. And really the reason in the end why we have followed this recommendation is that what actually happens in practice is that students have to, for instance, give up their part-time job or their full-time job in order to undertake that practice placement. They end up out of pocket. And in many cases that's actually deterring them from undertaking those courses. And I'm sure you agree with us on this, Senator Tyrrell, Australia needs more people with more qualifications. We need more people with university degrees, we need more people with TAFE qualifications, because the jobs of the future are increasingly going to require formal qualifications like that. And we don't want to see a system go on that actually deters students from undertaking really important courses like nursing, teaching, social work, etc., because they simply can't afford to undertake that practical component. So I think this is a really great measure that's contained in this year's budget, and I commend Minister Clare for acting on that recommendation, and I'm very confident that it will encourage more of those students to pursue those careers into the future.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, first supplementary.
Universities charge students full course fees for placement units, despite the training taking place off campus and out of university classrooms. If the intention is for the government to help struggling students, does the government believe it's fair that unis are piling money on students' HECS debts for training being delivered by someone else?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator Tyrrell. As I say, I'm not aware, as the representing minister, of whether the Accord review had anything specifically to say on that point. But I would surmise that the reality is that while students do undertake that kind of practical training outside the university environment, it might be in a classroom, it might be in a hospital, it might be in another like environment, there is still a requirement on universities to supervise, not on a day-to-day basis, but to check in, to moderate the courses, to assess the students' performance. So there is still a requirement on universities to deliver some kind of service to the students and to the employer who's hosting that student in a practical environment. So I recognise the point you're making, but it's not without cost to universities. But of course, you would have seen in our announcements this week, we do expect universities to provide a high-quality education to students at an affordable price, and some of the measures that we've undertaken will help deliver that.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tyrrell, second supplementary.
Practical placements are especially hard on rural and regional students. They often have additional travel and accommodation costs, and many of them won't get a cent under your paid placement policy. What does the government say to Tasmanian students who need to undertake a practical placement but aren't completing the 4 that you have put into this policy?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Sorry, Senator Tyrrell, I didn't hear the last part of your question, but what I think you were talking about was the fact that rural and regional students obviously incur other fees beyond, in their living costs while they're undertaking that kind of training. And I guess that's exactly what this payment that will now come through the federal government.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Tyrrell.
Redirect just a little, if I may. It was basically, what are you saying to the people in Tasmania, the students, that are not completing nursing, midwifery?
Thank you, Senator Tyrrell. Minister Watt.
Sorry, thanks for clarifying that, Senator Tyrrell. As I may have said in my answer to your primary question, the Universities Accord review did recommend that government should fund support for students undertaking nursing, care and teaching professions courses, and employers, public and private, should provide funding for other fields. So we do expect employers to be able to provide funding towards students who are undertaking other courses. But really, this comes back to the recommendations of the Universities Accord review. And as I understand it, the reason for their recommendation was that training to enter care and teaching professions needs
thank you, Minister. The time for answering
to be accessible.
has expired. Senator Cash.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Earlier today you voted to agree that the slogan "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" opposes Israel's right to exist, is a call for the abolition of the State of Israel and is frequently used by those who seek to intimidate Jewish Australians via acts of anti-Semitism. Tragically, this phrase is increasingly being used in Australia and elsewhere as part of an unprecedented wave of anti-Semitism. The Prime Minister has agreed that this is a very violent statement and that it doesn't have a place in our political debate. However, yesterday, Senator Payman, a Labor senator, proudly repeated this very phrase in front of assembled media. Has the Prime Minister now spoken with Senator Payman and about her use of the phrase and asked or demanded that she retract it? What apology and other action has he demanded of her?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. And I acknowledge the question from Senator Cash, and what I would say to her is she would have heard me say in my contribution on that motion, provide an answer to the topics that she is raising. And I appreciate, and the point I have made is that this is a government that does represent the community more completely than any government in Australia's history. It is a government that does represent, that does have members and senators from a wide range of faiths and perspectives and cultural heritages. I have
Senator Ruston, order. Senator Thorpe, order. Senator Thorpe, order.
What I also said in that contribution, and I think it is demonstrated by the interjections both by Senator Thorpe and Senator Ruston and Senator Cash, is that all of us in this place ought to be peacemakers. We ought to try and bring people together. We know.
Order. Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Just as I asked for silence when Senator Birmingham moved the motion earlier in the day, I'm going to ask for silence once again. Senator Cash, you've asked your question. The minister is on her feet. There needs to be silence. Minister.
Thank you. What I said earlier today, and I stand by it, all of us need to be peacemakers. We understand what has occurred and what is occurring from the abhorrent attack by Hamas, a terrorist organisation, to the humanitarian catastrophe that is occurring in Gaza and the loss of life. We mourn all lives, all innocent lives. I laid out in detail in our response our policy position, including in relation to that phrase, and I would refer the senator to it. She knows it. Now, what I would ask the Senate to consider is whether using this and these issues for political division is the responsible thing to do.
Senator Cash.
What you saw.
Order. 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 Did you wish to continue, Senator Wong?
What you saw today in response by the collective that is the Labor Party was a position that sought to be clear about our policy position, but also to lead by example.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Thank you. I ask again, has the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, shown any leadership and spoken with Senator Payman about her use of the phrase and demanded she retract it? What apology and other action has the Prime Minister of Australia asked of Senator Payman?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Wong.
The Prime Minister of Australia has articulated, including today, but on numerous
Minister
occasions—
Wong, please resume your seat. Once again, senators, you are being disrespectful and disorderly. I've asked for silence. That is what I expect. Minister Wong.
The Prime Minister of Australia and the Foreign Minister of Australia have articulated our position in relation to two-state solution and in relation to that particular phrase. We have done so on numerous occasions. I did so just a couple of hours ago, and the senator knows this. The senator knows this. What I know from engagement with Jewish community organisations is they do not want anti-Semitism in this place used as a politically divisive issue. What they want, yes, what they want is.
Senator Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Hughes, you are out of order and you are being incredibly disrespectful. I've asked for silence on a number of times. I should not have to keep having to sit the minister down. You are free to make a contribution at some other point, not question time. Minister, please continue.
What Jewish Australians do want is us to speak as one voice against anti-Semitism, and that is what I sought to do today. Similarly, we should be respectful of the trauma and distress that is felt by so many in our—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator McKenzie, which part of my request, my order for silence, does not apply to you? Which part? I should not have to keep drawing the chamber to order. If you want to make a contribution, find another place during the sitting of the Senate, not here. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Has the Prime Minister of Australia now spoken to Senator Payman about her use of the phrase yesterday, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free"?
Senator Thorpe, once again, I've asked for silence. It applies to you. I should not have to keep calling individual senators by name. That includes you. I'm asking for silence. Minister, please continue.
It does say something about the motivation of those opposite, that after the government senators voted in support of the motion,
Senator Cash, I've asked for silence. It applies to you. You've asked your question. Senator Cash, no, silence. You're not in a debate with me. I've asked for silence. I'm the president. Minister Wong.
Go back to the beginning. It does say something about the motivation of those opposite, that after the government senators have voted for a motion which made clear opposition on that phrase, they seek to make political division about it. It says something about their motivation. It says something about their genuineness. I am always happy, and I have been for all of my political life,
Senator
to stand—
Ruston. Order. I'm waiting for silence. Senator Birmingham. Senator Birmingham.
Point of order, President. The Prime Minister in the other place has twice today been asked whether he has intervened in this matter. The Minister representing the Prime Minister in this place has now thrice been asked whether he has acted on this matter. I ask that the Minister respond directly to the specific question asked by Senator Cash, which could not have been worded more precisely, about whether or not the Prime Minister has spoken with Senator Payman.
I believe the minister is being relevant. I have asked for silence. My order. And Senator Cash, I do hope that comment was not directed to me. It is my job as the President and my authority, Senator Cash, be quiet, to demand order in this place. Minister, please continue.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition should withdraw the imputation about the President. Order. Senator Cash and Senator McGrath. Senator Cash responded by saying it wasn't directed at me. Senator Cash, you are not in a debate with me or Senator Watt. Senator Cash, no. No, Senator Cash. It's time for silence. It's time for silence. I'm going to ask the minister to finish her contribution, and I do want silence, and I want some respect. Minister. We know what the motivation is from those opposite. That they're not interested in the government. They're not. The government.
Order. I have Senator what? I did, and I'm Senator. Please don't. I don't want it repeated. I'm simply going to ask Senator Hughes to withdraw that comment. Senator Hughes, I'm going to ask you once again to withdraw the comment without commentary. Thank you. Minister, please continue.
We support security for Israel and we support the establishment of a Palestinian state.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson-Young, are you on a point of your order?
I'm on a point of order, President. There are rules in this place about treating people with respect, about having a safe workplace. And what I have just seen is intimidation, bullying and harassment to a high order. And if you're going to come into this place and do it, you should be called out and thrown out.
Senator Hanson-Young, thank you very much. You are not on a point of order. I can assure you I was neither bullied nor intimidated. And the comments were withdrawn. Order. Senator Hanson-Young, please resume your seat. Senator Hanson-Young, please resume your seat. Senator Hanson-Young, all of the offensive comments have been withdrawn. Okay. Senator Wong, I'll just deal with this point of order. On the point of order, thank you.
The point of order. This is an issue on which there are strong emotions and strong views. I would really encourage all senators to not engage in personal attacks in the context of this debate.
Senator Hughes, I didn't hear the comments, but if you made the comment, I would invite you at this point. Please don't talk to me when I'm speaking. I didn't hear the comment. The same applies to you, Senator Waters. If you can't stand up and demand respect in this place, if you don't, then respect me when I'm responding. Now, the fact of the matter is, no, Senator Thorpe, I'm not entertaining any points of order. Please resume your seat. That is my prerogative to not. Senator Thorpe, resume your seat. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Once again, order. Order. Senator McGrath, order. Senator Hughes, if you did make a further comment, I invite you to withdraw. That is up to you. I'm going to move on. I am going to continue to ask for respectful silence and remind people of the Jenkins review and what we've all committed to be respectful. Senator Thorpe, it's your question.
My question is for Minister representing the AG, Senator Watt. The First Nations legal sector, which is under hugely increased demand, as you know, needed $229 million in the budget to ensure they can continue to deliver their critical services, including assisting women and children escaping domestic violence. The $15 million in your budget is shamefully inadequate and an insult to our people and the sector. Will the federal government increase funding for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services this year beyond the measly $15 million in the budget?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Senator Watt.
Thanks. Thanks, Senator Thorpe. I'll answer this question in a couple of ways. The legal services that you're talking about are, of course, covered by the broader National Legal Assistance Partnership Agreement that the government has, and we do, as a government, recognise the pressures that legal assistance services are under, whether it be Aboriginal legal services or more broadly. And we definitely support and note the importance of strengthening this sector because, of course, legal assistance is essential to ensuring access to justice and equality before the law. And that is exactly why the Albanese government announced in this budget $44.1 million of urgent funding for 2024-25 to help legal assistance providers address current resource and workforce issues until the new National Legal Assistance Partnership Agreement commences on the 1st of July 2025. The National Legal Assistance Partnership between the Commonwealth and all states and territories is a 5-year agreement to fund vital legal assistance services for the most vulnerable Australians. And as I understand it, one of the ways in which that funding will be used will be to index the wages of the very hard-working staff in those legal services, many of whom I know personally. So that's the first way in which we're dealing with the issues that you've raised, Senator Thorpe. The second way, of course, is through the ongoing funding that we're providing in Indigenous justice initiatives. Now, achieving the justice targets under the National Agreement on Closing the Gap is a key priority for the Albanese government, and it's of course vital.
Minister Watt. Senator Thorpe.
Relevance. This is about black women and black children escaping
Thorpe.
violence,
Senator
and
Thorpe.
he's talking about
Senator
something
Thorpe,
else.
resume your seat. That's not a point of order. The minister is being relevant. Please continue, Minister.
Thanks, President. And Senator Thorpe, I've already spent the bulk of this answer talking about the additional funding that we're providing to legal assistance services, including to Aboriginal legal services. And under the National Legal Assistance Partnership, overall, we're providing more than $2.4 billion over 5 years for legal assistance services across Australia.
Senator Thorpe, first supplementary.
Assistance for First Nations women and children experiencing family violence requires tailored approaches that only Aboriginal legal services can provide. Put your mates aside. Why hasn't the government's response to the urgent crisis of gender-based violence included adequate funding for First Nations legal services that support our women and children?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. Well, as I say, the government has, through this year's budget, provided additional immediate crisis funding to help the legal assistance services that perform that incredibly important work of assisting First Nations women, among others, who are escaping domestic and family violence. So, as I say, in this budget we've committed $44.1 million in immediate crisis funding to help legal assistance services address current resource and workforce issues while we're negotiating the final agreement.
Please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Order. Relevance.
The minister is being relevant to your question. Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Please resume your seat. Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President. And as I was saying, that funding that we provided in the budget last night this week will flow to legal aid commissions, community legal centres including women's legal centres, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services and family and violence prevention legal services. So that's exactly the kind of services that you're asking about, Senator Thorpe. And that funding includes $16.9 million to provide an indexation boost to legal aid commissions, community legal centres and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander legal services for the last year of the Legal Assistance Partnership. In addition to $27.2 million for crisis funding.
Has expired. Senator Thorpe, second supplementary.
So, Senator, what do you say to the black women watching right now, particularly those from Family Violence Prevention Legal Services, listening, Minister or Senator, whatever you are, who is—
Senator Thorpe. Senator Thorpe, you can either address the senator—
He's not listening.
Senator Thorpe, please
I'm not repeating myself and then calling point of order.
You are not in a debate with me. You can address Senator Watt as either Senator Watt or Minister. You asked the question. I've responded. Please continue.
You say to the First Nations women watching right now who are being denied access through the door for justice to leave the violence right now. What do you say to them?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Well, what I say to those women is that the Albanese government is providing the funding that those legal services need to provide the vital work to protect them from domestic and family violence.
Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe, you are out of order. I've asked you to listen respectfully. The minister is responding. The minister, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thanks, President. So, Senator Thorpe, as I say, the $44 million, and I know Senator Thorpe seems to be on the way out of the chamber, but
Minister, please withdraw that. We don't.
Okay, withdraw. The funding that we're providing includes $16.9 million to provide an indexation boost to community legal centres.
Please resume your seats. Are you on a point of order, Senator Thorpe? Senator Thorpe, it doesn't need a response. If you're not on a point of order, please sit down, or if you are leaving the chamber, that's fine. Minister Watt, please continue. Oh, you're done. Okay. Senator Pratt. Oh, Senator Ghosh, sorry. My bad.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. The Prime Minister has said that helping Australians with the cost of living relief is its #1 priority. I note that Tuesday's budget included tax cuts for every Australian taxpayer, provided new energy relief, invested in affordable housing, delivered cuts to student debt, strengthened Medicare and delivered cheaper medicines to Australians. How does the Albanese Labor government's budget help Australians to earn more and keep more of what they earn, and why is it important that Australians receive the cost of living support that was outlined in the budget?
Thank you, Senator Ghosh. Minister Watt.
Thanks to you, Senator Ghosh, for arguably the best question of the week, I think. There's been some other good questions. That's an absolute cracker. This budget is responsible and restrained, which eases cost of living pressures, puts downward pressure on inflation and invests in a future made in Australia. And tonight, of course, it is the opposition's turn to set out their plan for Australia. Now, we've seen a lot of no's from Mr Dutton and the opposition, but Australians now want to know what he will say yes to, because we know what the Albanese government is for. We're for more cost of living help, including energy bill relief for every household and a tax cut for every taxpayer. But where does Mr Dutton stand on that? Will he back that in tonight? Because it is really hard to know where Mr Dutton and the coalition stand on these issues, given the reaction of their colleagues over the last few days. So, on a couple of days ago on 7:30, Mr Taylor, the Shadow Treasurer, was being asked, will he support the government's cost of living relief going to Australian households? Mr Taylor, sure. But the next morning on ABC News Radio, Mr Littleproud, the temporary leader of the National Party, was asked about energy price relief, and he said, no, I think it should have been means-tested. So we're yes one day and we're no the next. We're yes when we're a Liberal, we're no when we're a National. But it didn't just stop there. They're all over the shop when it comes to what we should do about spending. So on the 14th of May this week, on 7:30, Mr Taylor is asked about spending, and he says Most of all, we would have been showing restraint. And Senator Hume, the Shadow Finance Minister, backed him in the same day. She says what we want to see in this budget is restoring a standard of living and taming inflation, fiscal restraint, bringing back that fiscal discipline. But unfortunately, Senator Hume couldn't even last 24 hours before contradicting herself, because the next day she's on the TV saying, well, everybody needs $300 off their power bill. In fact, we'd like to see more. So on Tuesday she's for less, on Wednesday she's for more. That's the kind of finance minister we get under the coalition.
Thank you, Minister. Order. 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 Senator Hume. Senator Hume. Senator Ghosh, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Low wages were an intentional design feature of the Liberal National Economic Plan when they were last in government. And Australian workers this week have welcomed continuing growth in real wages in Australia.
Senator Cash, I'm struggling to hear the question.
But we know
Order.
that wage stagnation cannot be fixed overnight. Minister, can you tell us what we're doing for cost of living relief in this budget?
Minister Watt.
Senator Ghosh, and aren't they touchy about their record about being about low wages? Well, for starters, Senator Ghosh, under Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, all 13.6 million Australian taxpayers will get a tax cut. But we know that under Mr Dutton and the Liberals, they want to take those tax cuts away, because it wasn't that long ago that Senator Hume, as the Shadow Finance Minister, was saying about the tax cuts, we'll have to go back to the drawing board. Well, tonight's the night for the drawing board to come out of the closet. Tonight's the night. Under Labor, wages growth is up, helping Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn.
Order.
We know that Mr Dutton wants to strip back workers' rights and force Australians to work longer for less. Our cost of living plan has been widely endorsed, even on Radio 2GB, where Chris O'Keefe this week said, I reckon it's pretty good. I don't see what the issue is with giving every household $300 off their power bills. It's one of the great misnomers that the coalition are better economic managers. Imagine being Mr Dutton turning up for a weekly cuddle with Ray Hadley on 2GB and then his own announcers turn around and stab him in the back.
Minister, order, order. Just a moment, Senator Ghosh. I haven't quite called you. Senator Ghosh, second supplementary.
We know Australian workers are under pressure, President. Minister, what are the barriers that stand in the way of Australians receiving much-needed cost of living relief under this budget?
Order, Senator McGrath. Order. Order. Minister, both sides. Order. Minister Watt.
Well, Senator Ghosh, I actually am surprised you had to ask that question, because those barriers are sitting right in front of you. Right over there, from about there right through to about there. That's where all the barriers are for the cost of living question. Our plan to combat the cost of living is putting downward pressure on inflation and helping working Australians right now. I've spent the last few months, and I know many of my colleagues, including Senator Ghosh, have been going around the country, meeting with workers, with farmers, with business owners, and searching far and wide for one single idea of what Peter Dutton stands for. Mr Dutton, I've been in Armidale recently, in the electorate of Mr Joyce, where the mayor of the town in his own electorate is backing a number of renewable projects in the region. But could I find any hint of a plan from Mr Dutton? None whatsoever. Of course, last week I was in beef with every member of the National Party and a few of my own colleagues in Rockhampton, and I bumped into Mr Dutton in a brand-new check blazer from Mitchell Ogilvy in Brisbane, all $5,000 worth. But could I find any evidence of a plan? No. Tonight is the night. Tell us what your plan is.
Watt. Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Wong.
Thank you, President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.
Thank you.
Here.
Sorry. Minister Wong.
In relation to this attendance, the government acknowledges Senator Thorpe for moving this order for production. We recognise her strong interest in the matter. However, providing these documents would disclose and preempt cabinet deliberations on a matter of national importance. The process for reforming our environmental laws is ongoing. We are committed to developing a First Nations engagement standard, the purpose of which is to ensure First Nations views are considered early in all projects and planning decisions under our environmental law. This will ensure that traditional owner groups and organisations have an early opportunity to protect their cultural heritage and enable their traditional knowledge to be factored into project design. I table the response to the Minister for the Environment and Water.
Senator Dunham. Deputy President. I take note
yes,
of the...
no, I was giving you the call.
Oh, you were excellent. That's great. Well, I'm pleased to have it. Thank you, Deputy President, because...
You're moving to take note?
Moving to take note, that's
yep.
correct, yes.
I'll give you the call.
On the
explanation.
Yes, so your government has just provided a statement and I'm taking note. So, thank you, Deputy President, and I do take note of this statement, and I share Senator Thorpe's concerns around what is actually happening, or more to the point, what is not happening here. We were promised at the last election by this government that they would have this comprehensive First Nations cultural heritage plan, that they'd get cracking on this, that they'd actually do the work needed to be done to give effect to this plan. Well, here we are nearly 2 years on. I think we're just 1 week short of 2 years since the last election, and they've done nothing, diddly squat. And we have a government come in here to try and explain away the lack of action. Now, we've got to remember the backdrop against which this response has been given, this substandard response, is against the backdrop of nil activity in the environment portfolio. We were also promised at this same point in time that we would have a full and comprehensive response to the Samuel review into our national environmental approval laws. By the end of 2023, we'd have laws in this parliament. Well, indeed, we don't. We still don't. Another 6 months has passed, no laws, and it sounds like that we won't be having those laws in parliament this term either. A broken promise, but hey, look, let's not worry about it. I do want to go to some of the comments that were made by Minister Plibersek in relation to the importance of getting these First Nations cultural heritage laws in place. And, of course, the promises that were made about acting on need for policy reform here. An Albanese Labor government will work with First Nations Heritage Alliance and other stakeholders to reform our national heritage protection framework and prevent the destruction occurring in the future, referring to the Juukan Gorge disaster. This includes through new standalone First Nations heritage protection legislation. Now, this was part of their First Nations People's Plan. Referring to that, and in relation to introducing standalone federal Indigenous legislation, cultural heritage protection legislation, Minister Plibersek said this: "There's never been a better moment to take this step." Now, that was on the 24th of November 2022, quite some time ago now, Deputy President. Never been a better moment than the 24th of November 2022. We're now in 2024, and the moment has well and truly passed. In the Nature Positive Plan document, which was tabled just a couple of weeks later, in December of 2022, the document states a national environmental standard for First Nations engagement and participation in decision-making will be developed as a priority, such a priority that 2 years can nearly pass, and we have nothing. Senator Thorpe is rightly angered by this, and I support her in that. This will ensure that First Nations interests and cultural heritage are identified early and can be protected as projects are designed. Emphasis on the word early. Well, that's not happening. These will ensure that cultural heritage is identified and protected early, providing certainty for traditional owners. Well, there's no certainty because there are no standards. No work has been done. I then look to, at the end of last year, October last year, at estimates, wondering what was going on, giving the government the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they are getting some work done. I asked a senior official from the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water where things were at. I said, is there a chance that what we're talking about here, these standards that were so critically important to have out the door and in place, would they be done before the next election? The official, a deputy secretary in the aforementioned department, said it's unclear. Not even they, those who are notionally doing this work on this critically important piece of policy, could tell us when work would be done. It won't be done before the election, much in the same way the national environmental laws won't be done before the election. And to this claim, this ridiculous claim of public interest immunity, to suggest in the letter that's been provided by the minister that this would preempt cabinet deliberations, the documents relating to this order, the order that Senator Thorpe moved or sought, would both disclose and preempt deliberations of cabinet. Now, this claim, if those who make these claims would read Odgers, you could understand this claim does not stack up, which is why we reject it. To claim loosely that cabinet documents are immune from production in the courts, or at least orders by this place, is not supported. Only documents which record or reveal the deliberations of Cabinet are immune. The documents we're talking about here don't fit into that category, and that's supported by case law. The case of the Commonwealth and the Construction, Forestry and Mining and Energy Union. The government hasn't got a leg to stand on here. They haven't done any work. It's an embarrassment, and I applaud Senator Thorpe for moving this motion, Deputy President.
Senator Napier-Price.
Acting President. 12 months ago, this government was, of course, advocating for a voice to Parliament for Indigenous Australians. And, of course, they talk a big talk in terms of their suggestion that they would act with transparency, accountability, all these big words that they like to throw around, and particularly when it comes to engaging, of course, with Indigenous Australians and planning for the betterment of the lives of Indigenous Australians. However, they have a terrible record. Of course, we know that this government funding the EDO, which was found by the federal court to have been exploiting traditional owners. However, despite this, they continue to think that clearly this sort of conduct, this sort of behaviour is perfectly acceptable and would continue to fund, of course, the EDO. Now, Justice Charlesworth broadly criticised Dr O'Leary for having lied to the Tiwi Island witnesses because he wanted his cultural mapping exercise to be used in a way that would, of course, stop the pipeline. You see, the problem with this Albanese government is that they are not actually interested in any level of transparency or accountability or consultation with Indigenous Australians with matters that relate to Indigenous Australians. And we've heard all kinds of rhetoric around this. We have heard the Prime Minister himself, of course, in his passionate speech about the Indigenous voice to Parliament, about how, well, once you start to listen to Indigenous Australians, then that is when we will get the results that are needed. Well, they've clearly demonstrated that they're not actually interested or prepared to listen and properly consult or be accountable for lack of consultation with Indigenous Australians right across the issues that concern us. And, of course, in their review of the EDO's conduct, this government didn't even know if traditional owners could make a submission to their review. I mean, you know, it would be funny if it wasn't so insulting and so ridiculous. You know, they wax lyrical about about their responsibilities, which of course again goes back to that issue of transparency. But the reality that we know, of course, that we've come to learn over and over and over again is simply not true of this. You know, I think it's time for the minister to show what responsibility looks like, what transparency looks like. Of course, to fess up about how serious they are about engaging Indigenous Australians. And, of course, as the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, I'm acutely aware of their lack of responsibility in this space from moment to moment, from the action on the ground in my own home community of Alice Springs, those that they fail to engage with, that they fail to be honest with about conversations that they're having with regard to, of course, issues like the rollout of the $250 million that's supposed to help in Central Australia. When you get a Prime Minister who flies in and flies out for photo opportunities in Indigenous communities such as the Binjari community to make an announcement, to have the lovely backdrop in the background of the community and of the housing, to announce a new housing policy, while the Binjari Aboriginal Corporation stood there waiting for their moment to have a conversation with the Prime Minister, who actually showed up in their community, only to be shoved to the side once the conference was done and dusted, and then, of course, the Prime Minister jumps in the car and runs away. Not good enough. More transparency is what needs to occur.
Thank you, Senator Nampijinpa-Price. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. Well, we all know that this Prime Minister is all hat and no cattle, and that was, I think, on display at Brief Week just recently. We know he's all talk and no action. He's all promise with no follow-through. Because we know before the election, and I just want to share with you some quotes that the now Prime Minister was wont to say on almost repetition. The transparency is always a good idea, he told ABC Drive. On Sunrise in July 22, well, what we need is transparency, and I want politics to be cleaned up. That's why my government will establish an anti-corruption commission, and that's why they will have strict adherence to the Code of Conduct. Code of Conduct? Well, I mean, we know that doesn't really apply, because let me tell you, when we have estimates last go, Minister Ayres was in so many breaches of it, it was so blatant, yet not even an eyebrow was raised by those opposite. The Albanese is committed to integrity, honesty and accountability. Ministers in my government, including assistant ministers, will observe standards of probity, governance and behaviour worthy of the Australian people. That's part of the Code of Conduct. Behaviour worthy of the Australian people. Well, I think today showed that, no, they're not. Certainly not their backbench when they call for genocide and the destruction of Israel, but there we are. Mr Albanese tweeting, we do need to restore faith in our political system. We need to make sure that there's transparency, accountability and there's integrity. Well, this is a government that is incapable of any of these things, and that's why we're here. And to Senator Price's point, last year $456 million was spent on this Voice to Parliament. The Voice to Parliament that was going to be so important because we cared so much about Indigenous Australians. We were so wanting to make sure that Indigenous Australians had a direct voice into government, affecting decisions and having an impact on decisions that were going to have significance in their lives. But yet here we are again. That was just part of an ideology. It was part of something Mr Albanese thought was a good idea because, again, once it failed, and spectacularly so, another great waste of money. I mean, that, to be fair though, $456 million on The Voice now seems just like a little flurry, a bit of a flush, when you compare it to the $1 billion they're going to spend on the rebranding of the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. These guys have just got absolutely no clue. Fiscal responsibility be damned. But we know that there is no accountability and there is no transparency and no honesty when it comes to the Australian people. And Senator Thorpe here has just made the request for some documents. She just wants to know what consultations happened, who's been spoken to, what are going to be the impacts. But the arrogance, the hubris of this government, I mean, we see it every Monday when we come back to parliaments, on NDIS Monday, when we've asked for documents that underpin the modelling of the NDIS and the assumptions that are made there. This is a program that's now going to cost more than Medicare, but these guys are unable to provide any modelling to show how they're going to dramatically impact the budget changes in that area. So why would they tell anyone what they're going to do around national Indigenous heritage sites? Now, for those, I'm New South Wales, but I did used to live in Perth, so I do pay a little bit of an attention to what's happening over in WA and WA politics. And they had an absolute disaster over in WA because Western Australia, under a Labor state government, brought in legislation that, in effect, if you wanted to trim the hydrangeas, if you wanted to dig a little hole to put a new tree in, you had to pay to get an Indigenous heritage assessment. So it took away the limits of what you could do on your land. It was increasing cost, and it was completely disastrous, and it had to be revoked. But for some reason, the federal Labor government is determined to push on with these sorts of legislative programs. Now, but because they're so arrogant, because they are so carried away by their own importance and significance and belief in their own belief, they're not even going to tell you about it before the next election, because they assume they'll be re-elected and they can just do it without your imprimatur, without the Australian people knowing what they're even trying to push through. Shame on you all.
Any other contribution? Senator Bragg, are you seeking to speak on this? Taking note? No, not take note on the answers in question time. Taking note of the minister's attendance and response, because I'm going to put that question before I give anyone else the call. I put the question. Those are the questions say aye, against no. The ayes have it. I understand, Senator Pocock, you have something you wish to bring to the chamber's attention, and then we'll go potentially to take note.
Thank you, Deputy President. I seek leave to move a motion relating to the division of the Treasury Laws Amendment Tax Accountability and Fairness Bill 2023 as circulated.
Is leave granted? Leave has not been granted. Senator Pocock.
Thank you, Deputy President. Pursuant to contingent notice standing my name, I move that so much of the standing orders be suspended that would prevent me from making a motion to provide for the consideration of a matter, namely a motion to give precedence to a motion relating to the division of a bill.
You have the call.
Thank you, Deputy President. As all of us know in this place, Australians are getting totally dudded when it comes to the export of our gas. We're a gas powerhouse, exporting 75% of the gas that we produce. In 2022, export revenue for LNG was close to $93 billion. $93 billion. That's more than double the federal government education budget for the same period. Yet not a single cent of petroleum resource rent tax was collected. 4 major foreign gas producers, Exxon, Shell, Inpex and Chevron, have not paid a single cent of petroleum resource rent tax on combined income of nearly $300 billion. $300 billion that they've received for exporting our gas over the 9 years to 2021-22. The cost of this failure in our tax system is huge. Every dollar of tax avoided by the gas industry is a dollar not available to fund our understaffed and underpaid frontline services. It's a dollar that we can't put into having more GPs for Australians to access through Medicare. It's a dollar that doesn't go to nurses and teachers. Every dollar of tax avoided is a dollar not available to invest in decarbonising the economy, decarbonising with the urgency that is required. Every dollar of tax avoided is a dollar not available to adapt our homes, our food systems, our ecosystems, in a budget that had nothing for nature, absolutely nothing for the places that Australians love and want to see protected. We're told the budget's tight, can't afford to look after the environment, and yet we're willing to just let these multinationals export our gas for free. It makes no sense, and I think most Australians would say, what are our politicians doing about it? How do they change this? And then they find out, oh, we've got this petroleum resource rent tax bill before the Senate. Maybe they could get us a bit more of that, as we've seen other countries do. Qatar exports about the same amount of gas as us, but they collect 20 times more tax on gas than Australia. Norway has a taxation rate on gas of 78%, nearly double the petroleum resource rent tax. The result is they're now sitting on a sovereign wealth fund of $2.4 trillion. In 2023, the fund made a profit of $320 billion. A profit of $320 billion. And we could be doing that for our resources, getting a fair return for it. But we've got the major parties and now the Greens stitching up a deal to just move on with things. We don't care. This 90% cap in this bill does not even bring in additional revenue. It just brings forward payments that would have happened anyway, and it will only bring forward around $500 million a year. In 2022, that would have been around 0.5% of the revenue earned on Australian gas. That seems really pitiful to me. That seems inadequate. And I'm certainly hearing from the people I represent in the ACT is that they want a better deal. We have huge challenges. We have huge challenges in front of us as a country, and this is revenue that we could put to work to make Australians' lives better and set us up for the future. The revisions of PRT receipts since the policy was announced have been revised down by $500 million. So you basically wipe out any changes, these really weak changes that are being proposed by the government. We should have a duty of care to young people and future generations in this place. We should be making decisions that are good for young people and future generations. And this change to the Petroleum Resource Rent Tax Bill is not that. It doesn't uphold that duty to ensure that we are benefiting young people from our resources and from the burning of gas that we know will saddle them with many challenges through their lifetime.
Senator McDonald was first, and then I'll give the call to you, Senator McKim. Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Acting President. Well, this is just a ridiculous motion, and I'm sorry to say, Senator, that you have been wildly misled and are misleading in your comments, because in the 22-23 year, $1.85 billion was paid in PRRT. That's with a B, not an M. $1.85 billion. Now, that's still in a time when that is a lot of money. That's from PRRT around the country, and that will and because the PRRT, if you understand it, is a delayed depreciation mechanism. So, if you don't explain the full tax system, then you're potentially leaving Australians not fully informed, and that has got to be one of our singular roles in this place, because we now are seeing a dirty deal between Labor and the Greens that is managing to throw the car industry and the gas industry under the bus this afternoon with their terrible guillotine measures. It is the lack of proper examination of legislation in place that leads to senators not understanding the way the PRRT taxes work, to not understanding how the LNG system works. So this is a complete backflip on Labor's own strategy, because it was only a week ago that they announced a key tenet of the future gas strategy, and yet here we are a week later showing that you can't trust their word. You can't follow through on what Labor will say on gas today, gas last week, gas today. The government is all talk on future manufacturing, future energy supply, future energy prices, but no action. And today, the Prime Minister and his cabinet have capitulated to noisy backbenchers, to the Greens, and it seems there is no Labor Minister for Resources anymore. And the deals that we're seeing this afternoon just confirms that Albanese has actually appointed Adam Bandt into the Labor cabinet as the Resources Minister. This is new news, I think, to most of Australia, handing the key—
Sorry, Senator McDonald, Ciccone.
Thank you, Deputy President. I'm always reluctant to interrupt senators' contributions to this place, but I do ask that you ask the senator, the good senator, to address members of the other place as well as members in this place by their correct title.
Please be mindful of that, Senator McDonald.
Thank you very much for that reminder. What has happened is Prime Minister Albanese has appointed Mr Bandt from the other House into the Labor cabinet as the Resources Minister. So just to clarify that again, it is no longer Minister King as the Labor Minister for Resources. It is Mr Adam Bandt, the member from the other place, the Greens political party leader, who is now the Labor Cabinet Minister for Resources, it seems. But this is terrible for the gas industry. It is terrible for energy policy. It is terrible for cost of living for Australians, because what Labor is doing today, by the dirty deal that they have done with the Greens political party, is that they will be voting for higher taxes, for more red tape, for slower approvals and for gas shortfalls. Because this notion that Australia can just claw back the gas that it's exporting to its allies is shocking. Imagine the moment that we say to our close allies, good news, we're going to turn your lights off because we can't keep ours on. Good news, those contracts that you were relying on are now not worth the paper they're written on. Won't that be fantastic for our relationships in this geopolitical region that relies on Australia being a reliable source of gas, of energy, of minerals more broadly? And it's just one more nail in the coffin for investor confidence in this country, because over the last 2 years we've seen interventions in the gas market, seen price caps, we've seen the introduction of unreliable renewables with no firming plans. We've seen additional green tape, cultural heritage expansion, the introduction of a new EPA. We're seeing further delays on the very things that will see Australians have lower electricity prices, more jobs in this country, to keep some manufacturing jobs, because you know the day when sorbent, when toilet paper manufacturers leave Australia, as they have moved to Indonesia, that it is a bad day for Australians. That is exactly what's happening right now, unless we wake up, we take control of our resources and bring more gas to the market. Thank you.
Senator McKim.
Thank you, Deputy President. There is no doubt that the PRRT is one of the great tax rorts of Australia's history. The PRRT is what happens when Labor and Liberal governments over many decades allow fossil fuel corporations to write their own tax codes. That's what happens. They make off like bandits, all the while they are cooking our planet and rendering this planet uninhabitable for human life and destroying the ecological systems that ultimately sustain all life on this planet, including human life. Now, what has happened today is an absolute win for the planet, an absolute win for First Nations people, an absolute win for the environment movement, an absolute win for the climate movement, an absolute win for all Australians who support First Nations rights, protecting the environment and taking real climate action. The big losers are the gas cartel. And I'll tell you why. Because today the Greens have killed off Labor's fast-track gas bill. Now, let's be clear about what's happened. Santos, the big gas corporations, Labor and the Liberals wanted to collude to bypass First Nations voices, to bypass environmental protections, so they could fast-track more gas mines in the middle of a climate crisis and in the middle of ecological collapse. But then what happened is First Nations people, the environment movement, the climate movement, supported by the Greens in this place, fought back, and today we've had a great victory, because Labor's fast-track gas bill is now dead. It has been killed off by the Greens, working together with so many Australians who do not support gas corporations having so much influence in this place and do not support gas and other fossil fuel corporations who are obscenely profiting while they are cooking the planet, being able to write their own laws in this parliament. Labor's fast-track gas laws were designed by the gas corporations for the gas corporations. They gave the Resource Minister the power to approve more gas mines with the flick of a pen right in the middle of a climate crisis. And Labor not only tried to deliver that, they tried to hide that provision in the middle of laws that are otherwise very beneficial to workers in fossil fuel corporations. The major parties may be able to be bought by their massive donors, bought by the highest bidder, but the Greens are not for sale. So our message today to the big gas corporations is we see you, we know what you're up to, and you are on notice. You might control the Labor and Liberal parties, but you do not control the Australian Greens, you do not control First Nations people in Australia, and you do not control the millions of Australians who form part of the environment movement, part of the conservation movement, and who want to see genuine and real action on climate change. What we are doing today is we have used our leverage, our power in this parliament. This is what happens when you put the Greens into balance of power. When you elect Green MPs in the House of Representatives, in lower house seats, when you elect Greens into the Senate, we will fight for you. We will fight for the environment, we will fight for climate action, and we will fight the big corporations who are cooking the planet and rampantly profiteering and price gouging. And we will fight to you by creating leverage like we did by blocking Labor's PRRT legislation right up until today and then using that leverage to kill off Labor's fast-track gas bill. We make no apology for using our power in this place. We make no apology for using the leverage that the Australian people gave to us when they elected us into the Senate and the House of Representatives, and we make no apology for using that leverage that has been provided to us by the millions of Australians who voted Green to deliver outcomes like the one we have today, which has killed off Labor's fast-track gas bill.
Senator Bragg, are you contributing on this, or you? The minister has priority, unfortunately, for you.
Well, I won't take. Thank you, Deputy President. And did you say unfortunately or
no,
fortunately?
Unfortunately for him.
Oh, I thought you meant unfortunately. The minister has priority. Thank you, Deputy President, and I certainly won't take up the Senate's time so that Senator Bragg can make his contribution, but I did want to stand and just put the government's position briefly, which is we don't support the suspension of standing orders and don't support the motion as a whole that's being moved by Senator Pocock. The Senate has determined its program for this afternoon already today with a number of votes that were held, and I would say to Senator Pocock, if he wanted to see money come to the budget sooner than it otherwise would have, he should support these sensible and modest changes to the PRRT that are being brought forward. I accept there's a difference of view about whether it's too much or whether it's not enough, whether the arrangements are right, but this is a better way of getting more raising more revenue to come to the budget to assist with budget repair and all of the priorities that Senator Pocock outlined by the passage of this bill.
Senator Bragg.
Thanks very much, Deputy President. I wanted to take the opportunity to speak to the bizarre situation we have that this PRRT measure is bundled in with significant corporate governance reforms that have been flagged after the PwC scandal. And this is a very consistent pattern here, where Minister Jones, who is notionally the Minister for Corporate Governance in the government, seems to have some role here in this particular bill. Often his bills, which are tax bills or corporate governance-related matters, are introduced by Dr Lee, sometimes not. But it is a bizarre way to treat what is a very serious reform package, which I think everyone accepts is important, and there's been good work done on the PwC matter by Senators Pocock and O'Neill and Colbeck, to bundle it up with the PRRT measure seems very strange and actually is quite poor governance in of itself. But the Labor government's commitment here to parliamentary scrutiny and governance of all these matters is strange. Now, either there is a deliberate judgment made in the executive that there is to be a covering up of what should be publicly available information, or there is a Treasury official that is drafting all the bills and the ministers are not taking any attention to the detail. Because this is another of 3 or 4 attempts in the past few months where corporate governance and financial services bills have had major deficiencies. And we know this because of the detailed scrutiny that the Senate Economics Committee undertakes, where the non-government senators work to look at the government's efforts on legislation. And I have to say, it's been pretty ordinary. Only in the last few weeks, we had to issue dissenting reports, the Coalition and the Greens, to say to the government its judgment to remove the parliamentary scrutiny in proposed changes to ASX ownership is to be rejected, because we believe that parliamentary oversight is a good thing, and that if there is to be a change in the ownership of something like the Securities Exchange, then it should be subject to a disallowance. Similarly, the government is proposing to issue the Reserve Bank with enormous payments powers. Now, I believe that from a geopolitical but also economic perspective, payments policy will be very significant judgments in the coming years. The government's view is we're not going to give any of these things to the parliament. This is all going to be outsourced and delegated to the central bank. And the central bank can make laws effectively without any parliamentary oversight and any capacity for the parliament to disallow an instrument. Now, all you have to do is read The Economist in the last few weeks and you'll see there is a massive proliferation of payment systems around the globe, and the Labor government's position is that is not a matter for us, that is going to be a matter for the central bank. So it is the delegation of authority to agencies which is fundamentally undemocratic. And that's why I very much welcome, I want to put on the record, the work that the Coalition has done with the Greens and Senator McKim in particular to highlight the government's commitment to covering up and neutering this parliament from having its proper role as a house of review. So in relation to the ASX ownership, in relation to this bizarre meshing of issues in this bill, in relation to the payments policy matter, these are all instances of poor governance and appalling drafting, either appalling drafting or a deliberate judgment made by the Treasury ministers. We imagine it's Minister Jones. We're not sure what he's doing, but we imagine it's probably him. And it is to be called out, and I appreciate the opportunity, Deputy President, to put these remarks on the record.
Are there any other contributions to the motion to suspend standing orders, as I intend to put the question? So I put the question. Those for the question say aye. Against? No. I think the noes have it. Is division required? Division is required. No, there was a voice here. So do you wish a division? This is suspension. We're on the suspension. I heard two voices. Was a division required, Senator Pocock? Did you ask me for one? Yeah, ring the bells.
lock the doors. So the question is that the suspension order moved by Senator David Pocock be agreed to. The ayes shall move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left. I appoint Senator Kvasic as teller for the ayes and Senator Urquhart as teller for the noes. Order. There being 30 ayes and 34 noes, the matter is resolved in the negative. We are going to take note, and I'm just waiting. I think the deputy's coming back. Yes.
Can I ask senators to, if they are not deciding to stay for take note, to please find their way out of the chamber?